Hey everyone, I'm Carole Mahoney here, and we are doing our live Buyer First Ask Me Anything. And I'm joined today by my special guest, Kenneth Burke. And before we get into introducing Kenneth, you might notice that my background looks a little bit different. Folks, I'm not in southern New England anymore. I've escaped the winter to southern Florida. And let me tell you, the energy that I have, well, hopefully I don't overwhelm you. But I'm super excited to have Kenneth here. Kenneth and I actually connected when I went on LinkedIn and saw that he was talking about some of the buying experiences that he had. Now, Kenneth is the VP of Marketing for Text Request, which is a business messaging platform. And if you follow him on LinkedIn, he just put out some interesting statistics about what the latest trends are that are happening in texting, which I'm definitely going to check out a little bit more. Ken, you've written over 1,000 articles on business growth for how many dozens of outlets, it looks like. You've helped companies go from pre-launch startups to billion-dollar businesses and achieving their goals. And you're from Chattanooga, which I hear you're a big champion of. And I hear that you're also open to some new book recommendations. I'm curious, though, what's the last book that you read, Kenneth, that you would recommend to someone else?
Uh, Honestly, don't remember the last one. The what I just finished reading
Mhm.
yesterday was it's called Endurance by Alfred Lansing, I believe is the author. But
Okay.
it's trip this guy Ernest Shackleton um, got in a boat in 1914, tried to explore or go across the Antarctic continent, and it failed miserably. But it's the story of a 17-month journey to survive, and it's
Ah,
pretty interesting. There's a lot of good leadership lessons in there if we got to tie it back to business, but
yeah.
that's fresh in my mind because I just finished it.
That sounds like an amazing book. And the fact that they took them, what did you say, 17 months and they weren't successful? There's a ton of
Correct.
lessons I can see in that one for sure. So let's dive in, Kenneth, because I you had said that you've had some good buying experiences. So we've had a couple of guests on the show already who have talked about their bad buying experiences. But let's start it off on a good note and tell me um, about the good buying experiences you had. I know one that you had mentioned in our previous conversations was Calendly, which I'm familiar with as well. So let's dive in there. When you decided to explore Calendly, what was your process to narrow it down to the vendors that you were trying to decide on?
Yeah. So to start with, what was the problem? So this is years and years ago, and so we were trying to reduce the number of steps it took for somebody to just book a demo with
Mhm,
us. And we've had a at the time still kind of this way, but at the time we had a fully inbound sales funnel. And so, marketing was doing all the stuff to bring people to the website, and then people would choose to, take an action to talk to us to start a conversation. Um, and we really hated the whole request a meeting option because you'd fill out a form and then somebody on our end would have to then follow up with you via email or phone call, try to get your attention again now that you've already moved on to something else to then pin down a time. Wouldn't it
mhm,
be so much easier if they could just choose a time while they're on the website and then, we'll find somebody who's available and show up and help you? So that was the idea. And so we searched just pretty much just a Google search, a couple of software review platforms. I think in our case, we looked at Capterra and G2 just to get an idea of the kind of the top five that were out there.
mhm,
And then we started going through, the websites, talking to people. Um, and for us, this is the experience I went through for this, and this is the experience I see most buyers go through. Is we went to the website and we said, we asked, "Do you do what we need? So what do you do? Can you
mhm,
actually help us solve this particular problem? What does it look like?" And Calendly has some screenshots and illustrations of using the product actually on their website, which is very helpful.
mhm,
uh, then what does it cost? Is this even worth us actually spending more time on, or is it going to be completely out of budget? Their pricing's very simple to understand. It's on their website, public. Say, okay, there's another one we could check off the list. Can I trust you? They had logos and reviews spread across their website, and of course on the review platforms. And so, we said, okay, hey, we can trust this. And it was also a low enough price point that we could just get going. Which brings me to the last question that we ask is, what does it take to get started? What's the next step I need to take?
mhm.
And I mean, those four or five questions there. Um, that's the process I go through. Most people on our team go through every time we make a buying decision. But in our experience, it's also what we've seen most people go through. for any buying decision. If it's your HVAC or your AC unit goes out, what do? You jump on Google and you say HVAC near me, and then you go to the top three reviewed sites and you check out what they do,
Hmm.
and you send them. You look at pricing if they've got anything there, and you send them a message, and then from that point, it's kind of whoever responds first is who you're going to go with.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this beginning part of your process, you mentioned a couple of things of, how easy is it for us to tell what they do and who they help and how much it costs? Like, is this even in our ballpark? And, what does it look like the actual tool itself? I mean, we're so used to seeing, previews and samples of things through our experiences buying on Amazon to not be able to see it elsewhere probably is frustrating. And the reviews for the trusting and how to take the next step. Out of those steps, what would you say is the most important one for you?
The most important one I would say is going to be pricing.
Mhm.
Like, just show me the pricing and exactly what I get with it. And I say it's the most important because it's not, it doesn't necessarily take up the most of the journey, but it's it's the crux on whether or not I'm going to actually buy or not. So I need to know. And if you're going to put hurdles in my way before I can get to that price, the chances of me working with you just go down significantly. Past
Mhm.
that, I want to see what it looks like because I want to know what kind of experience I'm going to have before I actually commit.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common buying situation or a yeah factor as well.
Yeah. No, you had mentioned that the price point for this was relatively low. If the price point were higher or it was something that was more complex, how would that have changed what's important to you in the process?
It depends on how complex. I mean, if theirs is it's a set fee per user, and then you have a few tiers that dictate what features you get. And
Mhm.
so, and that's very similar to text request pricing as well.
Yeah.
And so, if it were, if it were you've got and you can it's unlimited scheduling. So if it was say it was $10 a month per user, and you can schedule up to 5 meetings per month with that. And then the next tier is, I don't know, $15 a user, you get some more features and you can schedule up to 15 meetings a month. If it
Mhm.
was that kind of tiers, that complicates things, and it makes us put more effort into the decision making process than is really necessary. So some of that gets more into packaging and marketing and messaging, things like that. But um, yeah, just keeping it simple is so helpful. So in
Yeah.
that case, if it had been more expensive, the value they're bringing is large enough. Hopefully, they don't hear this and actually take action on it. But they're bringing enough value that they could charge way more for our use case, and we'd happily pay it because
Yeah.
every demo that comes in, we know has a certain dollar amount associated with it that will make in revenue, and so we're happy to spend whatever to get that. And right now, it's like I don't know 1/1000th of our average purchase price per
Mhm.
meeting. So
Yeah. And this is what I hear from a lot of clients who are thinking about putting pricing on their website. Their concern is that we don't want to be commoditized. We don't want to scare people away because they think it's too expensive. Or also, we don't want people to just choose the cheapest option either, because that might not be what they actually need. For you, when you're looking at that pricing, are you actually trying to budget it, or are you just trying to get a ballpark of, is this something that we can even afford to do?
uh, it goes in stages, but the latter is the first stage. I just need to see, is this even worth the conversation, right?
Mhm.
And then from there, it's okay. Can we get enough out of this to make it worth it, or do we have the budget, or do we feel comfortable enough maybe scaling something else back so that we can take money from that project and put it towards this? So
Mm.
from there, there are a lot of levers to pull, and a lot of times, to your point, that's what I hear people saying. Who refuse to show pricing is things are so custom, they're so complex. We don't want to give somebody the wrong answer up front, uh, which is valid, but you're just elongating the process, the sales cycle, and we know that every time you add another step into the sales process, there's going to be some drop off, and
Mhm.
so you have to understand how much you're losing at each stage, and then ask yourself, are you really comfortable with that?
Yeah. I know for myself as a buyer, when I go through a longer process and you're trying to figure out, is this the tool or the software or the service that's going to be right for me? And you go through the discovery call and the demo call, and maybe you're really excited about the tool. And then you get to the pricing conversation, and in your mind, you're going, please don't say this number. Please
right?
don't say this number, right? So I imagine that kind of reduces the friction earlier than later for you.
Yes, it absolutely, and to me, it's also a good lesson in understanding your customer in and out. And so,
Hmm.
if you know who your target customer is, and you are speaking to them in your pricing and packaging and everything else, uh, they're comfortable with this number. They're
Hmm.
used to this kind of number in their budget. I mean, even if it's, I don't know, if it's a six-figure deal, they're used to six-figure deals. That's where they spend their time. And so,
Right.
putting $100,000 or $250,000 for enterprise software on your website, in my opinion, should not be something to be afraid of, because people are looking at it all the time.
Yeah.
Now, if you're, and it also tells people who would be afraid of that number, that, hey, we aren't for you.
Hmm.
And that's going to save your time as well. And it works the same in reverse. So Calendly is for instance, coming back to them, is a small fee per user, 10 to 20 bucks, I think, depending on your plan, 10 to 20 bucks a month. And so maybe if you're a big enterprise and you're looking for something that's, more robust, that pricing also tells you that, hey, maybe this isn't a good fit for me.
Exactly, right. It's the disqualification that you have to be able to do early, especially given that we know most of our buyers would prefer to do their research and everything else online before talking with a salesperson. Like 80% of people would rather not talk to a salesperson. And then there's all of the stats that talk about how far along in the buying process people are, which is making this digital transparency, as I like to call it, so much more important. So, at what point did you feel it was the right time for you to talk to a salesperson?
Whenever we did enough research to feel comfortable.
Mhm,
So we had, let's say we started with 5 products that we were looking at, and then we narrowed it down to our top two. We had a couple questions between them. So then we started a conversation, and the
mhm,
conversation was not, "Hey, let's get on a discovery call so that then you can tell me if I'm a good fit for this, and then we can see a demo, and then I can ask you some questions." It was, "Hey, I'm sold if you can do this one thing. So I just need to know, I don't know, if I add 3 people on a team to this particular event, can you make magic happen?"
mhm,
And a simple yes or no in a live chat can give me that answer, and then I can move forward.
yeah. And so when you did finally talk to a salesperson at Calendly, how did it go?
I don't know if we actually did talk to a real salesperson. I think we might have just signed up and then asked
Mhm,
support a few questions.
okay. So this was more of a self-service type of option for you.
It was. I mean, we've definitely talked to their sales teams, or members of their sales team over the
Mhm,
years as we've grown and things have changed. But I think we started with, one user. Let's just get in and give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, it was, $10 a month or whatever. So we could tap
right,
out.
right. Is there an experience that you can think of when you did talk with a salesperson after going online and finding all of these things and it went really well?
Yeah. So one, we've actually just started with, it's a customer advocacy program or platform called
Mhm,
Influitive.
okay.
And for those unfamiliar, customer advocacy is basically turning customers who are happy with you into advocates for your brand. So it's a platform to incentivize them to take actions like leave you a review, give you referrals, or just engage with you in a conversation.
Mhm,
Um, so we've been saying for a while, hey, we have all these customers who love us. We don't really have a way to put a formal program around incentivizing them or just showing them our appreciation. And so let's start the research process for that. Um, Process for that was, I talked to a few people who I respected, who I saw they had their own programs going on, asked them what they did, what platforms they used, et cetera, et cetera. So I cut out as much of the personal research as I could, to
by
begin
getting
with.
a referral.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So kind of crowdsourced from a few different people. There were 3 or 4 platforms I think that came up, and then we did some of our own research too and talked to some people.
Mhm,
But then from that point, we went to their website, Then we reached out and said, hey, have questions. This is what we're trying to do. And Influitive, I've had a very good experience with their rep, Dylan. I think I'm actually talking to him later today, believe it or not.
Shout out to Dylan.
Shout out to Dylan. And the process was very simple. He was very professional. He was very knowledgeable about the industry, and he wasn't trying to nickel or dime or show me everything that the product could do. I just said, we're trying to do these three things. He said, here's how you do these three things. Are there any other questions you have? I probably asked a couple nitpicky things. He told
Mhm,
me. We moved on. You know, then we had a call about, they have their pricing, their basic pricing listed on their website. We had a conversation about the nuances of it, how many things of whatever are included or not. What will we need? We're
mhm,
not sure how this is going to go. Can we start with something and then refresh it in a 2 or 3 months if needed? Um, they address that all very quickly, very helpfully, and very clearly. Anyway, so that's been a great experience.
mhm. And so in your conversations with Dylan, it sounds like you had specific sort of product and features types of problems or questions. Um, what else is it about that conversation that stuck out to you as giving you a good experience? What was most beneficial in it?
The fact that he would address the question with what I'm trying to get out of it, not with what he's trying to get out of it.
I love that. I wish there were more of that.
Yes. Yes. Because so often, I mean, I'm in marketing, right? So I think about
Yeah.
it as too often businesses are saying what they want to tell, and they aren't saying what they need customers to remember,
Mhm. Or what
or what
customers
customers
care
need to
about to
hear.
begin with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, it's why we call these buyer first. It's why I talk about it's not about us and what we want. It has to always be about what they want because those who have the gold are the ones that make the rules, the buyers. So let's switch gears a little bit. So we've talked about what the good buying experience has and what was beneficial in that, and the fact that they were asking you questions about things that you cared about, not just the things that they cared about in their process. Sounds like that was a big deciding factor for you, and it sounds like has helped you to develop a great relationship with both Dylan and the company going forward because you're still talking with them.
Absolutely.
So let's switch gears and talk about the bad one.
Okay.
And we've all had those bad experiences. And you don't have to name names because we'll leave out keep the guilty innocent, so to speak. But what was the type of thing that or problem that you were trying to solve, and what was it in the process that frustrated you the most?
So one comes to mind was maybe this time last year or 18 months ago, we were looking for a new platform to rebuild our website on.
Hmm.
So we'd gotten to a certain level, we needed to really start from the ground up, and so we went searching and did the same thing I mentioned before, where Google search for whatever keywords, went to a couple of review sites, grabbed the top 5 or 10
Hmm.
off of that, and then started going through the websites. And there was one that had a ton of 5-star reviews. That at first glance from their website, it looked very well put together. They had, some nice logos shown from or customer logos. But then it started getting a little confusing. So the messaging on their website wasn't clear. There's a lot of buzzwords. It wouldn't just tell me, here's exactly what we do and who we do it for.
Hmm.
Gave them the benefit of the doubt because I'm in marketing. I see this every day. I'm guilty of it myself. Moved on a little bit. I did get to see the product some, which was helpful, not enough. And so needed to schedule a call to see the demo was, or to just see the product. They also didn't have pricing on their website, so I needed to see if they were even in the ballpark. And
Yeah.
I'm honestly a little surprised in myself for reaching out and going through that step with them. But anyway, I reached out, said, "Hey, I need to know pricing, what we get with it." They a couple of emails back and forth to schedule a discovery call. The discovery call was not really helpful, and then kept asking for a demo. Scheduled another call, said they would give us a demo, gave us like a 5-minute overview, with the slide deck, and then had some other questions for us that were still trying to qualify us,
Hmm.
um, which was is rather off-putting. Um, and then eventually, I think a week or two later, they sent me an Excel sheet that had a pricing breakdown based on our conversation, and the I think the lowest tier was 2 or 2.5 times what we had internally said we'd be able to pay starting off on something.
Mhm.
And so then it was just a non-starter. So there was a lot of time spent there. They had 3 employees, I think, on each call we had with them. So there's a lot of wasted time on
Mhm.
their end. Anyway, we could have skipped all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like the things that were most frustrating was number 1, they didn't have enough product information or being able to see the product on the website for you to be able to feel comfortable, which made you have to schedule the call. And then from scheduling the call, you said the discovery wasn't very helpful. Can we dig into that a little bit more? What about the discovery was ineffective or unhelpful or turned you off?
So in general, this is my semi-controversial take, is that for any kind of an inbound flow, a discovery call is a waste of time.
Mhm. Okay.
Because before I reach out, I've already qualified myself. If I'm not interested or I don't think I'm a good fit, I'm not going to talk to you,
Mhm.
right? So there's that. But then the questions were very basic, and they're often either things that were addressed in the contact form that I shared with them. So it's repeating or making me repeat efforts,
Yep.
um, or things that if they listen to what we're trying to accomplish, kind of that the answer to the first question, if they have any experience, they should be able to kind of decipher from there. So if I
Mhm.
say, hey, we need a platform that's going to scale with this because we have this amount of traffic, and we need to be able to customize whatever modules across pages so that our marketing team can jump in at any time and we don't have to go through product. Like,
Mhm.
especially in this world of website platforms, fairly standard things.
Right.
Um, so clarifying whatever clarifying questions they had, I don't remember the specifics, but they didn't really add value to the conversation.
It didn't get you to think differently about anything. It didn't offer you any new insights. It was just kind of like they were going through a checklist almost.
Exactly, yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
way to put it.
Yeah. It's not that I've ever seen that before or anything.
Yeah, right?
And so then you went into the demo, and so they asked you, I'm guessing, let's just say a couple of questions during discovery, but none of that impacted the demo, or did they actually use the questions from the discovery in the demo as well?
Uh, I they were included, but not directly. It wasn't a case of, "Hey, we are showing you a demo tailored entirely to what you have just told us." It was,
Mhm.
"Hey, we're gonna show you this demo, and also along the way, we will address those a couple of things you mentioned."
Okay.
Which in some cases I think is can be perfectly fine, especially if you have a simpler product. If somebody
Mhm.
comes to you and says, "I have one use case in mind," and you say, "Hey, there's 2 other things related to that we see from customers that we wanna show you as well," that's helpful. Um, but at least start with what I'm telling you I care about.
Yeah, yeah. William just commented, it's interesting that sellers still think that putting a lot of people on the call creates value.
Ooh, that's
Um,
a good one.
Yeah, and well, and what they're thinking is that they're posturing, like, "We have a team of people that are here to help you," and a lot of times you hear in sales training that if you have a VP on the call, then you need to have your VP on the call, like, have someone in the same seat on opposite of you. So yeah, it's interesting that people still think that, but that's not necessarily the case if you have someone who's attentive, asks good questions, and actually understands your world and the product that and how that would solve it. So I'm guessing that you didn't end up buying that product because it was 2 or 3 times again what you had said even in the beginning, where if you had known that pricing up front, you would have saved both you and them a lot of time.
Yeah, and a lot of it, I mean, regardless of the product or service, a lot of the times when you're making a buying decision, especially in the B2B space, you're deciding,
Mhm.
do I want to work with this person who I'm,
Yeah.
having to go through this process with? Uh, and, shout out to Dylan again with Influitive. I enjoyed working with him, so I thought I would also enjoy working with Influitive, especially after they came as a referral. There were a couple other platforms we talked to,
Hmm.
and I, you know, our team would get off a call and say we don't want to work with those people.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say to business leaders and sales leaders that your salespeople are your differentiation. They are your value proposition. And what you just said just says it. If this is the experience I have with this individual, then that's going to be the experience that I have with others that are in the company because that's how they think and work. So if you could give advice to the seller who didn't do very well, because we know Dylan is great, what advice would you give to them of what they should do differently? We've talked about a couple of things, but what would you share?
Yeah, well, I mean, going to the individual seller, I think one, you have to go a step or two up because the individual seller is not making the decisions for the processes or the script or what have you most of the time. So,
Mhm,
giving them the benefit of the doubt. One, pay attention to how you yourself buy. What steps do you go through? What are the hiccups along the way that you would rather skip over? You
mhm,
know, because if you just remove those hurdles, remove the friction. In software, product-led growth is a common term, and the tenet for it is create frictionless buying experiences. And Amazon's done a great job of that, right?
yeah,
Shipping's a non-issue. It's one-click purchase. All your credit card info and shipping is saved. So you just see it, you tap, and you've got it coming to you in 2 days or less.
mhm,
So anyway, so there's a tenet there. But yeah, think about how you typically buy and then have a conversation from one professional to another. You don't have to go through a set scripts. Everybody's unique. Um, yeah, I I don't want to give the advice of be human, but it's kind of if you can peel back the machine aspect of it and help somebody make a purchase decision,
yeah.
you'll do far better.
Yeah. I mean, we're still people. We just somehow forget that when we slip into the buying and selling role and we put on these masks and costumes of these roles that we think that we're supposed to be in, and we're still just human beings trying to figure out a problem. So what advice would you give the managers? Because you're right, the salespeople for the most part are limited as to what they can do when they're pressured by management and leadership that it needs to have these metrics and these things are done. And did you ask these things? It's their hands are tied to a degree. Um, but the managers who are the ones that are coaching and training and developing them, and you work with sales leaders all the time in marketing, I'm sure. What advice would you give those leaders and managers of how to train and develop their teams so that they can be more buyer centric, buyer first, and create the kinds of buying experiences that actually people want to be a part of?
Yeah, two things come to mind that have worked really well for us and that I share with others. One is pay attention to your metrics very closely every stage of not just your output, but what
Mhm,
it produces. Pay attention to every stage of the funnel and brainstorm what are ideas we could do to improve each stage. And so something we did early on, and we just kind of carried it through, is we just started at the bottom of the funnel and we said, okay, let's just fake numbers. Let's say, okay, we've got 100 people who are coming into the bottom stage of the funnel, but
mhm,
only two of those are actually purchasing. So what can we do to move that number from 2 to 10?
mhm,
Let's brainstorm some ideas, throw everything at the wall. Let's try a few things, see what works. And then you just move that at the stage and then pretty much repeat the process.
mhm.
Number two is talk to customers and actually listen to them and pay attention. It's simple in practice, or it's simple in idea. It tends to be a little more tricky in practice for a lot of managers, especially if you are in a larger org and you're set in your ways.
Yeah,
Um, but it's examples I gave earlier. It would not be difficult in that conversation or demo, let's say, to understand. Hey, this customers want something a little different than what we're offering.
yeah,
Or whenever they followed up with me via email and I said, hey, I just need this, we can skip these other two things. So you just need to create a feedback loop, right? That you can actually implement to improve ongoing. I don't think for most people, I don't think sweeping changes are the best approach. I think small iterative things end up making a, a massive impact every time.
yeah. I love that because a lot of times I see organizations, it's like, the training methodology, flavor of the year, right? So one year we're gonna do challenger sale, and then the next year we're gonna revamp everything into spin selling, and then it's gonna be solution selling. And to your point, it's those small incremental changes that are going to increase like interest in the bank that are going to make those other larger changes happen. And I also love what you said too about focusing on each stage of the funnel. So often I see managers that they only focus at the end, like what deals are going to close this week or this month and what do we need to do to get it across the line. And I often tell them, start at the very top of your funnel, get your first part of the funnel going well, because how you say hello is often going to impact how you're going to actually close the business later on. And so focusing on each of those stages and making small incremental improvements over time. Um, It's not as shiny and sexy and as the big revamp of everything, but for salespeople, it creates less stress, and also that translates into how they're going to interact with their buyers. Kenneth, any final words of advice out there for all of the buyers and sellers who are going like at it like this? What advice would you leave them with?
My go-to is always talk to your customers, right? But marketing and sales need to be fully aligned on what those customers are asking for and what they are uh, thinking whenever they see your website or come across you at a trade show or what have you. So I talking about creating better opportunities
Hmm.
downstream in the funnel. Um, Product messaging has been a huge factor we've seen. So if a buyer comes in and they read whatever's on your website or whatever conversation they have before they come into your sales funnel, let's say, um, if they're thinking one thing because of it, and then they get into a conversation and realize that's not actually what you do or what you offer, you've got, you've got some tension. Numbers are going to drop. Nobody's going to be happy. So you really need to be careful with that.
Yeah.
And by careful, I mean pay attention to it. Just keep working towards it, towards
Yeah.
improving.
Back in my early days, when I ran a marketing agency and we did a lot of SEO work, which means I did a lot of keyword research, which I really loved doing because for me, keyword research was like having buyers, like typing in what they're thinking in their minds. Like these are the words that they're using. And the client that I was working with was convinced that this was the term that he needed to show up for XYZ software. And when I actually went back and had conversations with their customers and said, well, what do you call this? They're like, oh, we call it this. And it was something completely different. And so we had to revamp the entire SEO campaign because the keyword that the business owner thought we needed to show up for was not the keyword that his buyers were actually using. So it seems, again, too, like a simple thing, but actually having those conversations and using their language is absolutely key. So, Kenneth, thank you so much. What's the best way if people want to continue to learn from you that they can find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Kenneth Burke. I look like this in my image. Follow me, DM me. I will respond if it's not a pure sales pitch. If you take some effort, I'll be there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, stay in touch.
Great. Kenneth, thank you so much. Everyone, join me next month. We're going to have another buyer interviews, is what we're going to be calling this series going forward, because like the vampire interviews, we really want to get into the heart of the matter and what's going on in the minds of our buyers. And what better way to hear it straight from the buyers, as Kenneth just said. So join us next time on the third Tuesday of the month. We'll see you then. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Next time, everyone. Bye bye.